level for a long time average cloud seeding increase of at least 7% in the snowpack. And this paper, this presentation at the conference emphasized that the 7% is a very conservative estimate, but it does substantiate the fact that there have been some increases and the confidence level is at 95%, so it's a quite significant finding. We had some discussion about hurricane modification. Some more computer modeling has been done looking at the impact that various aerosols might have on feeder cells in growing tropical cyclones such as tropical storms and hurricanes. We learned that desert dust has a weakening effect upon hurricane development in the tropics. And it seems to be the consensus of those who are now studying the subject that natural modification, also called inadvertent modification of hurricanes, is already happening by the anthropogenic aerosols that are being pumped into the atmosphere. To say it another way, global warming is having an impact upon hurricane performance, modifying hurricanes, in some cases increasing their intensity and in other cases decreasing the intensity. There still is a recommendation that more study be done, not actually in the ocean arena, but using computer models to see what sort of an impact we might have by seeding the eye wall of a hurricane. And given the oil spill that occurred last month in the central Gulf of Mexico, there have been a number of publications that have treated the subject of. It has been proposed that one method of perhaps ameliorating the effect of a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico would be to slicken the surface of the ocean with some substance that would cut down on the amount of water being evaporated and the amount of heat being released, thereby fueling the development of hurricane. And these writings have suggested that the oil spill may be an inadvertent, unplanned way of testing this hypothesis if and when a tropical storm does develop in the Gulf of Mexico and begin to interact with the oil residue that's floating around on the surface. It's going to be an interesting summer to see what kind of an effect, if any, this might have upon the development of a hurricane. In terms of precipitation enhancement in the summertime, there is a new program beginning in Israel that's going to focus on seeding of orographic clouds. There's been enough research done in Israel to reach the conclusion that storm clouds moving out of the Mediterranean inland over Israel are already highly naturally efficient, and that seeding them is having only a marginal impact upon those clouds' ability to rain more. But as those clouds die, more clouds are being generated further inland in the upslope area of the Golan Heights. And the research has indicated that there is an ample amount of supercool liquid water in these clouds. Their tops are colder than a -6 Celsius, which is suggestive. They're highly amenable to seeding. And beginning in November of this year, the Israelis are going to be seeding those storms in order to see what effect glaciogenic or silver iodide seeding would have on them. And the other interesting thing is the Israelis are now putting more weight into real-time satellite imagery and less so to radar data in order to identify clouds that have a plentiful supply of supercool water. And I say that to say that it may be in time that our projects might benefit more from being able to tap into virtual real-time satellite data in order to get a measure of the amount of supercool water in clouds. Doppler radar data, of course, is the primary data feed that our meteorologists rely upon. But a new tool such as this satellite imagery is becoming increasingly available and may well have an impact upon the clouds we identify for seeding in the future.
I'd be interested in hearing what Todd has to say about that.
Yeah. Todd Flanagan, South Texas Weather Association meteorologist. It would be good having a real-time satellite, especially for us doing the randomized experiment down there in South Texas. Being able to have a hold of these satellite images, as they're being produced would certainly help us. What we have out there right now isn't all that bad, but you can have a lag time of sometimes 15-20 minutes, and that can be really crucial when you're trying to get to a cloud or get to some development. So yeah, having something where excuse me, the satellite image is taken and you have access to that within a minute or two, that would be really beneficial. It would help all the projects out a lot.
I didn't realize you got a lag time on the radar.
No, not on the radar. The radar, there's no lag time. Well, maybe a lag time of a minute or two, but no, satellite imagery, yeah. For what we have available to us right now, maybe every 10 to 20 minutes there's an image, but that image usually by the time you get it is about 10 to 20 minutes old.
Okay, I thought you were talking about lag time on the radar.
No, radar is fine, but yeah, satellite imagery, there is definitely a lag time.
Thank you.
George Womar again. 20 minutes to someone doing cloud seeding is a lifetime.
Yeah.
Certainly the lifetime of the storm can be not much more than 20 minutes. Also wanted to tell you about a number of papers that were presented at the conference about the ongoing program in Wyoming, and this is really a significant development. You may recall that several years ago the Wyoming legislature appropriated several $million to do a very comprehensive operational program with a research component looking at the impact of seeding wintertime storms for snowfall increase using networks of generators that are strategically placed just below the rims of several mountain ranges in Wyoming. And for the last 2 years, the researchers have collected a total of 84 cases. It was thought at one time that some 300 cases would be needed, and if you get 84 in 2 years, then you're probably looking at another 4 to 6 years of research needed to get a sufficient number of case studies to be able to come up with something quite definitive in the way of proof that silver iodide seeding is having a positive impact upon clouds to precipitate. It's now thought that the number of cases needed is only 136 to 140. And the water agency in Wyoming went back to its legislature, made it aware of the fact that we're more than halfway there to having a sufficient number of cases to make sense out of what we're doing and to be able to reveal that to the satisfaction of many in the scientific community about the effect of cloud seeding. And the legislature earlier this year gave a 2-year extension to that program and appropriated another $2.85 million to allow 2 more field programs to occur this coming winter and the winter of 2011. And so they expect to, sometime in 2012, have something that would be a first of its kind, virtual proof that cloud seeding done in the way it's being done in Wyoming has had a certain quantifiable effect upon the amount of snow that's being delivered. So far, with 84 cases, everything looks good. They're seeing the numbers that they were expecting to see. They just don't have enough yet. But they've been armed with the resources to go out and get 2 more winters of case studies. Preliminary analysis of 7 missions that they did this last winter involving an airborne vertically pointing Doppler radar, a Doppler radar on an aircraft, working downstream of the Medicine Bow Mountains Preliminary analysis of the 7 missions when this aircraft was flown using this highly sophisticated Doppler radar indicate radar reflectivity near the ground, and thus surface snowfall rates were substantially higher during the seeding periods. That's a preliminary finding. And with more case studies, they hope to be able to corroborate that further. Some really interesting developments going on in the field. At the WMA annual meeting, we had a large number of people from the international community that are involved in weather modification. We had papers presented from folks involved in weather modification in Japan, Korea, China, Morocco, Australia, even Iraq. One of the biggest users of weather modification in the world is China. Over 20 provinces deploy aircraft to disperse seeding material for precipitation enhancement. They have over 1,900 counties in 30 provinces that are using ground-based artillery for firing rockets for both precip enhancement and hail suppression. So they're going at it on a massive scale in China. And that's all I have to report about that annual meeting of the WMA in Santa Fe.
George, you mentioned global warming. What is the opinion of the community with respect to global warming? The community believes it's happening, and is it man-made or natural or what?
Both. It is happening. We're going to come to a policy statement on weather modification that's being developed by the American Meteorological Society, and there are 2 pieces to this policy statement, one having to do with planned or intentional weather modification, which is what we're about here in Texas, and the other has to do with unplanned or unintentional, inadvertent weather modification that's happening in the world. There's an increasing amount of evidence showing that the amount of CO2 emissions in the atmosphere is having a profound effect upon the atmosphere to behave as it normally would. Hurricanes is just one aspect of the impact that the warming is having. We probably haven't discovered all of the impacts yet. I would like to move on to that policy statement and point out some things. As I told you at our last committee meeting, I've been working with a panel of 6 other meteorologists to draft a new policy statement for the board of the American Meteorological Society to approve and issue. The AMS, the American Meteorological Society, has policy statements on a number of different topics within meteorology and climatology. One of those topics is inadvertent weather modification. Every few years, these policy statements are redrafted, revised to reflect some of the latest findings that are going on in the field of research. And you've been provided with a first draft of a policy statement that we have offered to the board. It has been reviewed. We've gotten some input back from the AMS, some additional things to work on. What you have is unofficial. It's not yet been adopted by the AMS. But I did want to point out a few things that we believe need to be in a policy statement from such a prestigious organization as the AMS. I will identify the others who have contributed to this draft policy statement. Bruce Bowe, who works for Weather Modification Incorporated in North Dakota. Bill Cooper, who is the chief scientist of NCAR's Earth Observing Laboratory in Boulder. NCAR is the National Center for Atmospheric Research. Andy Detweiler is our chairman, and he is director of the National Science Foundation's Physical and Dynamic Meteorology Program. The other 3 members on the panel are Greg McFarquhar, who is with the Department of Atmospheric Science at the University of Illinois, Matt Pasernich, who is a statistician working for NCAR in Boulder, and Mark Solak, who's vice